I'm Alan Combs. I want to welcome an old friend of mine. You are old, actually. Brian Gari, singer-songwriter, written Close Encounters of the Celebrity Kind. You had a Broadway show.
Yep.
Called Late Night Comic. You've written, more than 800 songs, 40 years of songwriting. Your first song published at 15. You are a grandson of the legendary Eddie Cantor.
Yep.
And Late Night Comic was on Broadway. It was loosely based on some character you knew, right? At one point?
Yeah, a guy named Alan Colmes.
Well, it was the original name of the character was like Alex Coleman or
That's
something,
correct.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I gave the show over to Alan Nee, who wrote the book for the show.
Right.
But yeah, the original character.
I could have made it to Broadway.
Well,
but they changed the character too much.
Well,
it could have been about me.
It could have been. Well, yeah, it could have been about you.
So you have written this book, Close Encounters of Celebrity, and of the Celebrity Kind, and on the front cover. And by the way, you'll be at the Drama Bookstore in New York City tomorrow.
Tomorrow at 6 o'clock.
Where is that, by the way?
250 West 40th Street.
Okay.
Right near 8th Avenue.
And there's you as a young child on the cover with Jack Benny.
Yes, Jack.
On the cover. So there may be people today who don't know who Eddie Cantor was.
Well,
but he was a huge star.
Oh, huge, absolutely. But they know him now a lot because they watch Boardwalk Empire.
Right, that's right.
And they see this character. But of course, I'm too cheap to have HBO, so I've never seen it. But
you never saw that?
Never saw it. But
so he is a character on Boardwalk Empire.
Yeah, he is, and it's a made-up character, though, mostly. I understand that, the drama that they have behind it is all, scripted and everything.
But back in that era, he was a huge star.
Huge. Well, he was huge for many, many decades. He started off in the teens doing Ziegfeld Follies, which graduated into the 20s of doing some of that, and eventually he started making movies. Whoopi was his first movie. Huge success.
Really? Not Whoopi Goldberg.
No. But maybe she got that name from there.
I mean, he had that song "Ida, Sweet as Apple Cider," which is about his wife, which is your grandmother.
Well, he chose to, just to clarify that, he chose to make that about his wife, but it was actually written by two guys named Eddie Leonard and Eddie Munson. And Eddie Munson, I understand, got paid off.
Not Eddie Munster.
No, not Eddie Munson. 1903. It's a 1903 song.
And your grandfather also wrote the Looney Tunes.
You just made some money from my family now.
Did I really?
Yeah, I think you did.
No, just me doing it does not make enough money.
Well, they're going to say Alan Colmes.
But he wrote that.
He did. He actually wrote most of the music and lyrics along with Charlie Tobias and a guy named Murray Mencher, who actually ended up doing a lot of Connie Francis songs.
And you almost single-handedly have kept his legacy alive.
I've tried. Back in the late 80s when CDs were coming out, I tried to get some excitement from the record companies about reissuing Eddie Cantor. Yeah. And at that point, the labels said to me, well, we're going to go to Tower Records. Remember Tower Records?
Yes.
I think are they totally out of business now?
I believe so.
Well, anyway, they said, we're going to go into Tower Records and take a look and see what's in the Eddie Cantor file. There was nothing. Yeah. So they said, okay, come on in and you'll start producing stuff. And I did. I ended up producing for RCA and for Sony and many companies.
Now, you decided to put together this book of all the people you've met, starting with Jack Benny.
It's not all the people I've met.
Well, all the people you've met who you can talk about legally. And with Jack Benny on the cover, and he's got his wallet out looking at a dollar bill.
We all know about Jack Benny.
I mean, as a young child, did you have a sense of who Jack Benny was? And I mean,
not really.
Huge star. Huge.
No. Look, I didn't even have a sense, too much of a sense about my grandfather's status. But these were huge stars. Jack Benny was a giant. And actually, people probably remember Jack Benny better than they do my grandfather because my grandfather didn't have a syndicated television show like Jack Benny. Jack Benny's show still continues to air. I mean, it's on, I think, Antenna TV now.
Yeah.
So.
But did you have a sense of him as a young child?
Not really. That picture on the cover is me at 10 years old. And I was asked to go to the Waldorf Astoria, guided by my parents, of course.
Right.
I didn't just walk into the Waldorf Astoria and say, "Where's Jack?"
Yeah.
And they say, "You don't know Jack."
Right.
Anyway, so I went there with my sister, and we accepted awards on behalf of my grandfather, who was too ill to make it. It was 1962,
and toward the end of his life.
Yeah, it was. He only had 2 years to live. So we went there, and Jack Benny was the man who gave us the awards, and the photographers were there. And luckily enough, I held on to that photograph.
But you don't get rid of anything. You get rid of nothing.
Nothing.
Your house is like a museum.
Absolutely. When I read in the New York Times this week about hoarders, I guess I have to.
You're like the Collier brothers, right? Yeah.
Well, close to it. Although I read about them, they had to like break into their house.
Right.
Oh my God!
And now you have, pardon me, you have a great story. I'm just getting a cold here.
Oh, I love that. You got the cough button.
It's called the cough button. That's why they only heard me through your microphone.
Oh, so if I curse, I should really push that button.
You'll be. We have security.
Oh, okay.
Danny Thomas. You told an incredible story in this book about it. Now we all remember Danny Thomas. Make room for. We had Marlo Thomas on the show not long ago. She had a book out.
Oh, okay.
Make room for Daddy. Right. Lovely Family Guy. St. Jude's.
Right.
Make room for one of the classic sitcoms of all time. The Danny Thomas Show. Make room for Daddy. And you have a Danny Thomas story that does not exactly comport with that image.
You're right. If people get this book, they're going to find some stories in here that are a little bit risque at times. Right. But, I had to be honest. My experience with Danny Thomas, what basically happened, I'm not going to go into the whole thing because I want people to read the book.
Nor will use all the language you use.
Oh, I can't do that, unless we hit that button again.
Yeah, right.
But what happened was, here I am, a struggling songwriter, trying to get my songs out there, and I see Danny Thomas on The Tonight Show, and he does a song called The Best Thing That Ever Happened to Me.
Right.
Well, I thought he was just covering the song by Jim Weatherly, that, Gladys Knight and the Pips.
Yeah.
Right. I thought, hey, it's a cover, that's all he did. But in those days, this is the 70s, and I was in my early 20s, in those days, you thought, if I wanted to get a song recorded, you go to anybody. You'll go to Danny Thomas. I mean, Danny Thomas. They paid like $300 if you did your song on the Tonight Show.
Right.
So I went to Danny Thomas, thinking, well, he was best friends with my grandfather, and you know yourself, Alan, because you've known me a long time. I try not to use the Eddie Cantor name to open up any doors. I haven't done that most of my life, but in this case, this was an old friend. I used to see Danny Thomas sitting around my grandfather's house, talking to him and trying to cheer him up and everything in his old age. So I thought, let me give a call to Danny Thomas. So I try to find a phone number for Danny Thomas while he's in New York. And I find out he's staying at a swanky hotel on Central Park South. Yeah. So I pick up the phone and I call the guy up. And, you got to be very careful because when you call these celebrities at their hotel, they may have had a long night, the night before. You don't know who he's been with. There may be 14 girls in his room.
Not Danny Thomas.
Not Danny Thomas. Well, maybe so. You never know. So I waited till noon, and I called up, and I I asked for Danny Thomas's room, and they switched me right up there. Now, these days, you probably could never get
Well, he wouldn't register under that name, probably.
Right. Yeah. These days, it would be Thomas Danny or something like that.
Tom Daniels.
Yeah, Tom. Oh, that's a good.
You like that?
Well, let's let Danny Thomas know to use that next time. Oh, I forgot. He's dead. Okay.
Yeah.
So I made the phone call, and I get him on the phone. This is unbelievable. I get Danny Thomas on the phone. I say, hello, Mr. Thomas. This is Brian Gari. My grandfather was one of your friends, Eddie Cantor. Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah. And I went,
maybe he thinks you're a phony, just trying to.
Well, maybe, but I'm naming names that are, he can understand and everything. And I said, I saw you on The Tonight Show doing that song, The Best Thing That Ever Happened to Me. And he goes, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I said, how are you, by the way? And he says, I've got a blank earache.
A blanking earache.
A blanking, yes.
Yeah.
So, I'm being very careful because I'm on Fox.
Yeah, right.
Or wherever I am right now. I have no idea where
You're all over the place.
Okay. So they said, so he says, he didn't seem like he was in the friendliest mood at that moment, So I said, well, I heard you do the song on TV. And I said, would it be at all possible for you to listen to some of my songs and maybe do those on the Tonight Show, or do something with the song? And he goes, are they published? And I said, Mr. Thomas, yes, they are. Thinking,
that's a good thing.
That's
right?
a good thing.
You're a professional.
Right. Oh, yeah, I'm in the business, And he goes, then I'm not interested. And I said, oh, why is that, Mr. Thomas?
Yeah.
Mr. Make Room for Daddy.
Yeah, right.
And he says, because I only do songs that I publish. Got it? And I went, yes. Goodbye.
Well, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. He didn't publish, did he?
Yeah, he.
He published that song.
That's the.
He's the publisher.
Did you read my book?
I did. Wait a minute, you wrote a book?
That's the punchline.
You wrote a book?
That's the punchline.
I forgot that he published that song.
Yes, he published the song.
All right, the book is Close Encounters of Celebrity Kind. More celebrities to talk about and some great stories with Brian Gari. We're coming right back. and then back to your calls at 877-4-ALAN. Brian Gari is our guest. Brian is a songwriter, a performer, grandson of the late legendary Eddie Cantor. Close Encounters of the Celebrity Kind is his new book. We'll be at the Drama Bookstore in New York City tomorrow night at 6.
Right, and for people that can't get there, they should go to briangary.com.
That's Gari.
Yeah, Gari.com.
And you can get the book, which is Jack Benny on the cover with a young Brian Gary. You look a little older now.
But, yeah, and I have a beard.
You we were just talking during the break how you have spent a lot of your career getting your music to people, and the whole exercise of getting your songs to people that in alone is a book, the experience of getting your material to artists to get them to sing.
Yeah, I got a review on this book about exactly that. The part of my book that somebody wrote about that they thought was so great is my trials and tribulations of being a songwriter in both New York City and Los Angeles when I would take my songs around. Yeah. So I kind of tell what the era was like by, like in Los Angeles, when I would go up and down the Sunset Strip. Yeah. I don't drive, and I still don't drive. So it's hard to be in Los Angeles without a car. So I used to go up and down the Sunset Strip in the late 60s, early 70s, and I would take my songs and I would knock on all the doors of all the L.A. music publishers.
But getting people, first getting to them is a whole thing, and then getting them to take it, and then they'll say, "I'll get back to you." Nobody, and then often they don't.
That's what happened in my story about Johnny Mathis, because Johnny Mathis, do you remember that story?
Yeah, sure.
Johnny Mathis was here in New York, and if I didn't get out to L.A. to meet these people, I had to do my job here in New York. And I mean, when Regis Philbin had his show, I used to sit in the lobby whenever he did a show, or race down there. A lot of times.
How's that stalking conviction going for you?
Oh, it's great. I've just finished my serving time, and but what happened was I used to go to Regis's studio there, and they all knew me after a while. But what would happen is I would watch the show in the early morning, and he'd say, on today's show we're going to have Johnny Mathis on, and I'd go, oh my God, I've got songs for Johnny Mathis. So I rush into the shower, grab my bike, and get all the way down to the studio in like 20 minutes, because the studio was about 2 miles or a mile and a half from my house, So I'd get down there and I'd wait. I'd be panting, and I'd be there with a song for Johnny Mathis. And of course, in those days, it would be probably a cassette. You'd have a cassette, and I'd be there waiting and waiting. And then Johnny Mathis would come out, or whoever it was. In this case here on the in the book, the Johnny Mathis story was with Bill Boggs on Midday Live.
Midday.
Yeah. But,
and how did Johnny respond?
Well, the funny thing about Johnny was really, really nice, I've got to say. And that's, the book is not a mean-spirited book, basically. I mean, I told that story, but I thought it was funny about Danny Thomas, You don't expect Make Room for Daddy to say, I've got a blanking earache. Right? So,
but Johnny Mathis was receptive.
Very nice. Very, very nice. But what happened was, in those days, that was even a disc. I gave him a disc, and it wasn't even like a cassette tape. So these discs cost us songwriters about $3 a pop. So if you didn't get it to the person, if they threw it out, you just lost $3.
Yeah.
So it was more of an investment for songwriters in those days. So I gave one of my songs to Johnny Mathis. I got past security. There was like no security back then, I got past, and I gave him the song, and he said, well, Brian, I'd be very happy to listen to your songs. Thank you so much, Mr. Mathis. And I was so happy.
And you figure, hey, I'm in.
Yeah. I thought, wow, I may. And, you have visions. At that point, you're almost on your way home, visions of gold records with Johnny Mathis. He does Wonderful, Wonderful, and 12th of Never, and Brian Gary's song, Well, it doesn't exactly happen like that. Yeah. And I came out of the studio, and so did Johnny Mathis, and I looked at his attaché, and he didn't have my disc with him.
Right.
He had left it in the studio. But the fortunate thing about this was he saw my face, and he went...
You waited to see if indeed he was going to take it with him?
Yes. I thought that was... Because I didn't trust how well it was going, And it wasn't that he was mean. He just... that disc didn't mean a whole lot to him. This wasn't...
So you waited till he comes out of the studio. You see he doesn't have the disc.
Right. And he looks at me, and he looks under his arm, and he doesn't have the disc, and he holds up his hand like, okay. And he runs back into the studio to get the disc, which he did.
But you have never heard from him again?
I'm still waiting.
All right. Well, maybe it'll be the next, when you get home, you may have a message in your machine.
Oh, okay.
All right, now, you had a long time back and forth email relationship with George Carlin until he died.
Yes.
A couple of years ago.
Yes. George Carlin, for all of you out there, if you ever thought about what he was like as a human being, he was one of the nicest guys that I have ever encountered in this business. I will tell you a little bit about this relationship, because the first time that I met George, first of all, I went to see everything he ever did. I bought everything he ever did. He was one of my idols. One of the greats of comedy, no doubt about it. And what happened was I was driving my bike up 6th Avenue with copies of my Broadway show album, Late Night Comic, in my bag. And, I was just on my way home, and I was going up 6th Avenue, and who should be coming down 6th Avenue on his way to do the Letterman show when it was at NBC was George Carlin. And I went nuts, and I thought, oh, my God, here is George Carlin. I got to meet this guy. So I stopped my bike, and I said, George, I have everything you've ever done. There's so much stuff that I have that I'm sure you don't even have. Uh-huh. And I said, there are a few things that I've always wanted. That would be great if I could get, And he says, well, sure. He says, I'm just on my way to Letterman now. I said, well, I just want to tell you, it was really, really great to meet you. And I said, thank you very much. And as I drive away, I say to myself, Brian, you're crazy. Why didn't you give him the album to Late Night Comic?
Your Broadway show.
My Broadway show.
Yeah.
So I turn around and go back down 6th Avenue, practically running into cars and everything, and I catch up with George again. Now I look a little crazy because this is the second time I'm coming up to George Carlin. I go up to him, and he was gracious again. I said, George, I had this show on Broadway. This is the album, Late Night Comic. He says, oh, great. Is your address on there? I said, yeah. He says, I'll send you stuff in the mail, okay? And I said, okay, great, thanks. He says, I'll get back to you. And I thought, that won't ever happen.
Yeah.
Well,
and he did.
2 weeks later, I received this huge package in the mail of all this great, rare Carlin stuff and his latest album, and a note from him complimenting me on Late Night Comic because of one particular thing that I had forgotten about. His name is in a rhyme scheme.
That's right.
In the opening song of Late Night Comic.
Right.
I say, it's about a piano bar player, and he's going to stop doing the piano bar stuff and become a comedian. So the line is, I'm through playing Harold Arlen. I'll be the next George Carlin.
Yeah.
This flipped him out.
And you forgot at the time you gave him
I forgot. All I was doing was plugging the album, I forgot.
And you developed an email friendship with him.
Yes.
And more, actually, up and right until he passed away.
I put it all in the book. The emails were so much fun, and he was so great to me that. Go ahead.
Well, I just saying we only have a moment left here, so we barely scratched the surface. I just want to mention again, you'll be at the Drama Bookstore tomorrow at 6 o'clock.
That's right, 250 West 40th Street.
And if you go to Brian Gary, Gari, that is, .com, you can buy the book.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's so much more we never got to, but it's a great book. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Alan. Great to see you again.
And we will be right back, and we'll open up our phones. Name and town only, 877-4ALAN, 877-367-2526. You can join us online at AlanALAN.com. Back with you on the phones and Radio Graffiti coming up in the next half hour as well in just a moment.